This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Andrew Johnson. He is a leadership advisor and author of Iron Sharpens Iron, where he explores how the operating systems of elite sport can help businesses build stronger accountability, execution, and performance cultures. Drawing from lessons in professional sports, particularly the NFL, Andrew translates concepts like scoreboard clarity, roster discipline, standards under pressure, and tape review into practical frameworks leaders can apply inside modern organizations. His work focuses on helping companies move from average to elite by creating cultures where accountability is visible and standards are consistent and performance improves because there is nowhere to hide. Andrew brings a practical and thought-provoking perspective on leadership, competition, talent, and sustained high performance. So Andrew, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Thank you, Steve. Good to be here.
So I'm talking to you. You're in Sydney, Australia. So it's one of the wonderful things about technology today is that we can have this conversation even though you're clear on the other side of the world.
That's true.
So why don't you just give us a little context to begin with here? We heard a little bit in the bio that you've kind of taken this sports analogy to business and doing that, but tell us a little bit about where you grew up, some of your early influences and what you did early in your career and how you ended up where you are today.
Thank you. I guess if I go way back to university study, so I did my postgraduate degree in management and technology policy. So I've always had a fascination around more the technology selection rather than the technology build. But who could have seen the technology that's available now from 25 years ago? It's been an amazing trajectory. So across that time, I've sort of flitted between the education sector and the technology sector. In more recent times, I led the Technology Association for Professionals in Australia. And so a lot of technology policy, a lot of roadmap, a lot of understanding regulations, ethics and the like. But more importantly, how do you engage in investment in technology to help economies and businesses grow?
So, when we look at the your book, it's Iron Sharpens Iron. What's the origin story of that book? I mean, were you a sports person first or a business person first, and how did you bring those two worlds together?
So always dabbled in sport as a young person, so that the enjoyment aspect of participation. But bringing those together came through the COVID experience. I had the opportunity, obviously, like a lot of us, to work a lot from home. Was driving my kids to school regularly and could not agree what would go on the radio.
Yes,
So
okay.
I was more into talkback and they were more into the FM music channel. So we settled on some NFL podcasts, would you believe? And my daughter, my oldest daughter, became a really big fan. So we were able to talk about business strategy during the off season and how that applies more broadly. So that's how the thoughts processes started. But really what inspired me was the ability to make decisions under pressure. So that COVID period, a lot of sporting leagues in Australia didn't do so well. There were two that did very well, very similar to the NFL's trajectory. And I think that provided that sort of one black swan moment on how you've prepared yourself to make sure that you could handle any rough seas. So I use a lot of anecdotes around the finance performance of sporting professional bodies.
Now, I made the mistake of being a clueless tourist when I flew into Melbourne one time, and it was the finals of the Australian Football League. And trying to get into my hotel early was not going to happen after the night before was the football game. So obviously, there's some excitement about Australian football. Yet, you talk a lot about the NFL. So how do you go from Australian football to be so enamored with the NFL?
So I guess I was always a, a fan of the NFL from afar, but the time zones didn't really help. So the COVID experience meant being at home more, I invested in the NFL app. So before it went to DAZN, there was an NFL specific app, and all of a sudden every game was available live. So Monday mornings, a 3 a.m. start or a 5 a.m. start did not affect the workday, and I was able to consume a massive amount of NFL over that sort of 3 to 4 year period. Um, Obviously attracted by the fact that it's the highest grossing revenue sport in the world. So that's very nice for business analogies. And then there's a really close connection between the AFL and the NFL. So the AFL is the biggest in Australia in terms of gross revenues. And we've had a lot of Australian football kickers turn to the NFL and become punters. So there's a
Yeah.
long lineup, and today in college there's a good half dozen that are plying their trade, hoping to get a ticket to the big game one day.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan, so we have one of your Australian punters on our team who's amazing. So for the novice, explain to us just a little bit what in your opinion is the difference between Australian football and the NFL in the US?
Oh, look, the substantial differences. So in the AFL, everyone gets to touch the ball. So you do have positions. There's a bigger field. Both are chess matches, though. But I'd say the NFL and the offensive line versus the defensive line and the battle that goes on in the trenches and how to protect the quarterback, that's really riveting on a TV product when you can't be there live. So it's very easy to watch and to understand that it is a game of inches. And so that bit appeals. Michael
Hmm.
Dickinson, who you referred to there, he did start up in the AFL with the Sydney Swans. So that's his connection. Because we kick a very similar size ball, there are transferable skills. So a lot of Australians have been kicking that football since they were 6 years old. And so their skills that they've developed over that time can transfer to punting in the NFL.
Yeah, interesting. So the title of the book, Iron Sharpens Iron, that's quite a metaphor. So how did you come up with that title, and what do you think of when you say that?
So in the context of the NFL, it's a lot of, I guess, media conferences with coaches during the off season. So how do they prepare their team for the hard season ahead? You have examples where their best offensive player goes and has reps against the best defensive player. So it's that concept of, I guess, sharpening your skills against the best of the best is the way that you lift performance of both. It also means a little bit deeper in exposing your weaknesses to superior competition in some areas so that you can start to fine tune and hone those skills and improve as an overall player.
So tell us a little bit about your business background now before you got into the sports analogies and so on. So what exactly did you do in the business world and what was your role in those businesses?
So all management related, and these days it's even more evident with, I guess, artificial intelligence rolling out. The need to reinvest in technology so that you can sharpen your business model, become more customer focused, lower back end overhead so that your price point's competitive, and how to mobilize the ship. In the education space, what that means is transferable skills. So you have teams, members today doing one particular role. That role might need to change 5, 10, 15, 20% over a 12-month period or 2 year period. So how do you create that change? How do you upskill workers? And then how do you attract new workers? So that was one of the key ingredients in the book. NFL teams are always looking to get better. So if you have that mindset in the business world, where are your talent suppliers and how do you introduce them to your business? Not just wait for when there's staff turnover, then hope you get someone through an advertisement in an online jobs board, but to take some science to talent attraction.
So you argue that sports and businesses share a competitive DNA. So what's the single most misunderstood or underrated lesson that business leaders could borrow from sports teams to help with their strategy right now?
I think the big thing is there's a continuous feedback loop through playing the tape. Professional sporting teams can perform on the day because they've done thousands and thousands of repetitions. The playbooks start the season so thick that every possible outcomes considered, and then a game plan devised. And business say they do that, and it's true. It's just not on that weekly cycle and that weekly cadence that happens in elite sport. And that varies. Like I don't want to just give a broad brush. If we're talking a small enterprise, only 10 employees, very different to one that's got 200, very different to one that's got 50,000. So how do you provide constant feedback, improve skills of all team members, and make sure that you're optimizing your outputs?
So by that, a couple things there that you're talking about. So you're talking about, looking at tapes. So looking at what you've done in the past and what can we learn from that? You know, what did you do good? What did you do poorly? How do you make that better? So in sports, that's watching game film and doing that. So in business, what do you do in business to give you that same discipline?
So, as a general rule, some organizations might be doing their performance reviews annually, some might do it quarterly, others might have a weekly stand up. It could be one to one or it could be one to a group of people. So, it varies significantly and it really depends on the output of the business. Services based industries are definitely different to product based industries. But how do you provide feedback, be able to articulate what good looks like, indeed, be able to identify what winning looks like? Very different in the business world. Sport's very clear. 32 teams in the NFL, only one team can win the Super Bowl every year. You have to get to the playoffs in order to have a chance. So there are some stepping stones to make sure that you optimize your possibility of winning that ring. In business, a lot of time is spent on crafting what does success look like. So we know what our North Star is, and then we start to craft a plan on how to get there.
There's two pieces to that when I think of that analogy. I think of, as you said, watching the game film of your own performance and your own team's reaction to situations. And you look at that and you say, you know, we need to do more of this and we need to do this better. On the other hand, you also kind of have like a scouting report, let's say, of the team that you're competing against. And one of the things that you talk about in the book a little bit, I think, is that competitive part is businesses don't do a good job of analyzing their competitors and what they're doing as to how for you to do it better to maybe gain market share or better performance. So talk a little bit about that and how you think that we can learn something from sports in that area.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And certainly there are models and methods like Porter on how you take into consideration a whole range of variables, the competitive landscape being one of those, the regulatory being another. And organizations or businesses will say they do that. I guess the question becomes how much time do you need to spend doing that? So there is a theory that if you're focused on your own performance and optimizing your own performance, the scoreboard will take care of itself.
Hmm.
And personally, I am a believer, but to understand what innovation looks like, to understand the competitive tension, you do need to have a methodology, a very focused look at what your competitive landscape looks like. And just like we're talking across big oceans at the moment, competitors these days can come from anywhere across the world. So the globe has shrunk. And so just to understand what those technologies look like, to understand what overhead looks like, to be able to create value, understanding what your cost base looks like, they're all very important factors. That can be done again quarterly, can be done monthly. It really depends on the maturity of the organization and where it is in its own growth trajectory.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting balance that we can talk about in that, in the sense that sometimes you just need to focus on your situation, what you do best, and trying to do the best you can be, and so on. But I do think it's sometimes if you look at somebody else saying, what are they doing that we're not? Or why do they seem to be able to do this and we struggle with it? And so learning from others and doing that research and analysis of other teams, I can see how it could help, you do better in your own business. There's a great story, in the biography of Steve Jobs, where they were making the Macintosh, and then he just kind of said, "Geez, I wonder what we need something a little more." So he goes across town to Xerox and sees what they're doing in their lab, and he comes back and he says, "Hey, they got this thing called a mouse. Maybe we can use the mouse in our situation." And of course, we know the end of that story is that became part of the Macintosh and kind of blew the computer world crazy with that. So I think it's interesting to also look at what others do and not necessarily chase them or try and do everything they're doing because that's not who you are. But it makes sense to know what the competition's doing, and so you don't fall behind and miss something big.
I couldn't agree more. And to take that to the next level, whether it's in the NFL or business, sometimes when you secure new talent, if it comes from your competitors, you get that direct insight. If you've had a lot of stability and a workforce that have been average tenure of 10 years, people might understand the concepts of where the change is coming from, but have they actually done it? So introducing new talent that has had a good solid look under the hood and can take those transferable knowledge and skills into your business is always a way of staying fresh.
So, being an NFL fan here in the Seattle area, and of course, I have to brag that our Seahawks were Super Bowl champs last year. One of the things that's really exciting to watch is sometimes in the first half you're getting killed. We're just nothing's going right, and they're gaining yards and whatever. But we always have that confidence because we love our coach that at halftime they're going to go in and make adjustments. And it is amazing sometimes when they come out in the second half, it looks like a totally different team. So somehow they've made the adjustments. They've seen what's not working well. They've maybe tried some different things. So again, if we use the analogy, it would probably help us if we did that more in our companies, like they do at halftime of a sporting event.
Absolutely. If you leave it to just once a year, you're always going to be playing from behind. And those media conferences with Mike McDonald were just pure gold for the last 12 months. He has a very focused mindset. When something negative is asked from a journalist, he simply does not care. He's just going to focus on what they need to do to become better. But that's a very good example in itself. If we look at the final 2 minutes in any NFL game, having a quarterback be able to make decisions to go the length of the field, playing from behind, not making any errors, having confidence that team members are going to be where they are through that repetition process, through the playbook. It's just beauty to watch that sort of pressure in front of 60,000, 100,000 fans, knowing there is no room for error, and then moving the chains from one goal line to the other and executing when the pressure is on. So that's the really good example for businesses to take. It's through that practice you can have confidence that your team members are going to do the right thing at the right time and optimize your chance for success.
I think I'll know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. So when you see a great performance and they come down and they do these great things at the end of the game and they win the game, how much of that is due to preparation and carrying out the job and doing what they're supposed to do and all that, or how much is that based on just pure talent where somebody just reaches above and beyond and does something spectacular because of their God-given talents or what they've produced over the years as far as practice and so on. It's interesting to me that I think I know the answer, but it's probably all that earlier preparation that brings that forth.
That's true. And Steve, I think that's an excellent example. Uh, I think, if you look at the different positions in an NFL team, so you might be a wide receiver, you might only get to touch the ball 4 times a game, and that's not a lot. And sometimes you can see players griping about who's getting the balls thrown to them and who's not getting enough touches, and that happens. But when the pressure's on, the coach is going to make a call based on the playbook, and you need to perform your role as if you were getting the ball. The QB is going to have different reads that are available to them, but ultimately the coach is making the call on the sideline. The QB needs to follow the call, and then it's up to your offensive line to give that QB as much time as possible for the QB to throw it and have the expectation that their player is in position. You can't do that just based on talent alone. It is every person operating as a single unit. So that team mentality is absolutely critical.
Whenever I watch an NFL game, I always think too, like when you're looking at the coach and they have the clipboard with all the plays on it and they're looking at it and they're going through, it kind of comes across as really? I mean, is it really that strategic and that systematic? Or is it like, oh, I think we'll run this play now. This sounds like a good idea. So having studied it like you have, what's the answer to that?
So I think the long-winded answer is during the preseason, your playbook's this thick, and as you go through preseason training camp and you start to have games, it becomes clearer as to what you do well and what you don't do well. And then when the pressure is on, the coach is going to make a play that he feels most comfortable that the team will execute well. So it might only be a half dozen plays that are the reliable bread and butter that can get you those extra yards so that you can get a first down.
We've focused mostly so far in this discussion on the NFL. What other sports do you find intriguing, and what other sports do you have good analogies with as far as business reasons?
So if we look at baseball, a couple of analogies in the book. So swing for the fences, having a specific goal, putting all your eggs in the one basket and going after that target like there is no tomorrow. Another one from baseball that I really love is ball on third base thinking you hit a triple. So that sense of entitlement that can sometimes show up if an organisation's been successful in previous years, hasn't done the hard yards, hasn't done the preparation, hasn't established the standards, just has the expectation that that success will continue, losing sight of the bigger picture. That's a great analogy in the baseball section.
Well, let's keep going with these sports analogies. So another one that comes to mind that you talk about is the difference between building, a great team or a great roster. So we all know that you can have a team with unbelievable all-stars on it, but they might not beat a team that works together better, even though the talent isn't there. So tell us a little bit about, sports teams and what they do to build their roster and that what businesses should do with that in mind as well.
So if we were to use the basketball analogy for that particular question, you might have three superstars, and who's the supporting cast, and can those three superstars work with a supporting cast to optimize the overall unit? That's always a challenge. Sometimes the biggest names don't get the job done. And why is that? I think from the human side, particularly in services-based industries, it is about understanding that not all positions are created equal. People like to be treated equal, absolutely. But from a coach's standpoint, from a business standpoint, some positions have more importance for the overall cog in the machine to make sure that's successful. That needs more time for development, more time for the coaching, more time for the strategizing. So that can be sometimes a little bit tricky in a people-oriented business where people are feeling that not getting as much attention as others. But ultimately, if we look at the playbook, the scheme and philosophy, the how to win, becomes really important that each position has a different output expected, and that output comes at a certain remuneration. So that's another tricky bit. Not all positions can be remunerated the same. Others have more complexity about them, so they attract higher, might be harder to recruit in the marketplace. So all of those different elements, all those different ingredients, putting it into the one playbook and making that playbook sing.
So when you're looking to round out your team and have the best performing team, you may not look at somebody strictly as talent. You may look at somebody, how do they fit into what we already have as in a supporting role as more of a team member, not necessarily a superstar. So that's something in the interview process and the recruiting process that you need to consider and not just always go for the biggest, brightest star.
Agreed. And it's even it works in both scenarios. In the NFL, where it's a salary cap league, you only have so much money to spend. So that needs to be distributed based on player position, based on the skill set that you have, and then based on the ability to attract talent in those areas that you see of need. And in basketball, where might be a looser, or baseball where there isn't a salary cap, it's still the same case of you only have a specific capacity to invest. What areas do you need to invest? And just taking the superstars off the shelf, you see it all the time in baseball, doesn't guarantee success.
Mhm. In a business, when you have, let's say you do have a superstar and you think that person is really going to help you get to where you want to be, and you need supporters of that role to make it work. How do you talk to the supporters to make them feel like that person isn't getting special treatment or that person isn't getting all the attention or, what about me sometimes comes out in this. So how do you do it? You just call it what it is and say this is what we're going to do, or what would your strategy be on that situation?
So I think that the team building, the team bonding, developing trust is always an important ingredient throughout a year. Very important to have your North Star, have the team understand that, have those collaboration sessions where everyone understands what you're looking to achieve and then what each role is needed in order to deliver on that vision. My personal view, people who have played team sports sort of innately understand that the sum of the whole is where the success comes from. Sometimes if you've had some background in individual sports, you might not necessarily understand that every person in the team needs to be firing on all cylinders for you to optimize your output. In that specific example, why can't we do it this way? My feeling is that if we tailored our playbook a little bit differently, we'd have more success. Well, what's the basis for that? What's the data-based evidence? Is that an agreement across the team? So they're all big ticket items that need to be discussed properly. Can't be done in 1 hour over a cup of coffee and a stand up at the beginning of the week. But those strategy sessions become really critical to understand what it is we're trying to achieve and how can we achieve it given the resources that we have.
If you're interviewing somebody or looking for somebody and you find out in their resume or through discussion that they do have a background in sports, that they've been on teams, that they've performed at a high level in the sports world. I take it that's probably a real plus in your book. And would you look at somebody like that and say, this person may have a better chance in our company because they kind of get the concept you just talked about?
So I wouldn't say 100% it's a lock. I do think it is transferable, but ultimately you need some passion for the industry sector that you're working in. So why am I going to invest my time in this particular sector? What do I enjoy? How do we create value together? Why do we take that to the marketplace? So I don't think it's automatic. It is a nice trait, which is the same as when you're scouting college. You can see traits and you think that it's going to transfer to the NFL in a full-time professional environment. But until someone actually starts there, becomes part of the squad, uh, meets the expectations around simple things like diet, strength and conditioning program, doesn't turn up to, I guess, pre-season training camp with extra weight, all those sorts of things suggest discipline. So it would be a conversation, but as a trait, I do like that people have previously had a passion and a target and they've been willing to go after it.
How do you look at the two positions? Like I've heard a lot from college coaches, let's say, that the best or the ones that have the most success often will say, I'm not focused on winning as much as I'm focused on helping this person learn and grow and develop, and I'm helping them become just a better person, a better human being. That's what my coaching is focused on. Yet in the sports world, sports franchises, performance is everything. So, how do you look at performance, what they do versus developing and helping them learn and grow? That can, work together, but sometimes that could be at odds.
No, I agree. That's a really tricky example. And I think it's become more complex in the NIL era, where historically there's been time to develop the person, and ultimately you're looking for optimal performance come playoff time, and actually having live bullets in the actual season becomes really important. You can train, you can have preseason games, but it's not the same thing. Particularly in the professional environment with a quarterback. During the preseason, there's a lot of insurance to make sure that um, quarterbacks remain healthy. When you hit live bullets in a game, while penalties can still be a lot tougher these days, the challenge of having a 330-pound person fall on you, if you don't fall the right way and injuries happen, then all of a sudden your ability to invest in the next game, you've got salary cap reductions. What's your backup look like? How many weeks off will that be? So they're all important ones. Um, I'm not sure that college coaches these days can, to the degree they once did, look at the person holistically, be focused on making sure they complete their education. From the individual athlete's mindset is how do I get to the next level the fastest? I think that's why you're seeing so many movements inside the portal, not to mention remuneration now changes the game entirely.
I think it's interesting when you look at teams, and the same goes for businesses. You have somebody that is a superstar. Their talent's off the charts. They have all these skills. That what they're able to do is above everyone else. Yet, if they're not a team member and if they're toxic to the other team members, a lot of times that won't work. And so we've all had teams sometimes where we follow and then it's like, oh my, what? We traded that guy? How could we have traded that guy? Well, and then we find out later that he was causing problems in the locker room or he wasn't a good team member and the other teammates didn't like him. So even though he had this extreme talent, sometimes you can't go with that. Sometimes you have to give that up to for the sake of the culture and the teamwork that's left behind.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So it does happen. And the conversely, what also happens is sometimes coaches and general managers hold on a player too long because jobs are on the line. So if a talented player is really talented, the hope is they can eke out a few more wins for you and that you can finish the season satisfactorily. In a game of inches where, 8 coaches, I think, turned over last season, it becomes every decision is a pressure decision.
And then when you look at developing your team, their strengths, building the culture, doing the things that we know works. What are some coaches that you can think of that do that really well, whether it be sports or business? What is it that they do and why are they successful when they focus on that?
So my favorite one to look at videos of the old days is Nick Saban. So he had a lot of um, high quality quotes that are out there in the media. And you can imagine in an environment where people are training the sorts of pressure, but he was very much focused on improving the fundamentals, making sure the player can be all they can be, having those competitive reps against each other. So that iron sharpens iron concept making sure that the collective can improve. And then the Bill Belichick one of obviously playing to your strengths and hiding your weaknesses in any game plan and against any of your team. So there's some of the high level ones. I think overall all coaches are cognizant of it, and some do well, while others might be feeling a little bit more pressure. What I think is very impressive is when you start the season, you've got 90 players in your squad, and they have to cut down through a period of 8 weeks to get to the final squad. Um, there's a lot of pressure on all players to make sure they can continue their journey in this professional environment. So they need to be going hard at each other, sharpening the iron, and yet still being a good team player. Because if you are, I guess, rubbing people the wrong way, that's going to cause conflict, and you'll be cut very quickly. So that's a fascinating environment that doesn't happen to the degree that happens in the NFL compared to a business environment.
I think it takes a great coach and a great leader in a business to look at and see potential in someone who maybe it isn't there right now. In other words, if you could just do it strictly on performance right now at this time, you may let somebody go or you may miss somebody who peaks at a different time because we all peak at different times and sometimes we need a little more training, a little more experience. But I think a good coach and a good leader can see that and say, okay, maybe they aren't in the top 10 right here, but I'm willing to go with them for a while because I see and sense that potential.
Couldn't agree more. So how a coach can sort of hide a player that they believe in, that has the potential in their practice squad, continue to develop them over a couple of seasons before they make their way into the first squad. That's really important. So you do have to have that eye for talent. Look at the traits. How much time are we willing to invest? How much time can we invest? Where your squad is strong at the moment, where it's weak, and be able to forecast that into the future so you can start to do those development programs in the background.
So, can you come up with some specific examples or things you've seen or read about or aware of where people have come from extreme adversity, where things weren't going well and things looked like they were on a train wreck, and somehow they hung in there and they were resilient and it came through and later became more like a championship situation. So, can you share any of those examples with us?
So I prefer not to use specific examples because the journeys and stories that fascinate me are the undrafted rookie. So they go to a practice squad, somehow they survive the cuts, and then over a 2 year period, they can make their way onto the squad. Similarly, there's a lot of bubble guys that will have to bounce around different franchises, and you'll see literally hundreds. So the NFL average career is 4 seasons or less. Um, Bubble guys who have gone to 4 different franchises, seen the locker rooms of 4 different areas, have had to fit in different environments just to gain that opportunity to show they can compete at that highest level. Those sorts of stories inspire me, and there's lots that have eked out 40, 50 career games over that 4 and 5 season. Particularly, if I was to look at a position that inspires me, the running back, often you have lower draftees come in as a running back. They're expected to run through those trenches and take the hits, and sometimes they can have a shorter lifespan because of the physical nature of that business. But when they're on song, and if the O-line can open up some opportunities and they can make 50 and 60-yard runs, that's what gets the crowds excited. So there's a lot of mindset needed for a young person coming in, or even a veteran coming in, looking for that chance, looking to extend that career. The bubble roster or the undrafted free agents, they're the ones that I think are really inspiring. And there's been plenty of examples over the years of people who've had lots of success despite not being the number one pick.
I think a lot of times people talk about, let's take the quarterback position as a reference right now. So a lot of people say, why do great quarterbacks in college not always make great quarterbacks in the NFL, and vice versa? One mediocre person in college becomes a great, let's take Tom Brady, for instance. And a lot of times people will say it's because the mental game of a quarterback, being able to read the defenses and see the switches and see the kind of things that not everyone picks up on. So the mental part of that position could be and maybe is more important than the pure talent.
Absolutely. So I agree. I think again, there's 101 different variables in those particular examples. The famous one in recent times was obviously Brock Purdy being the last pick and having success as soon as he started playing after his two quarterbacks in front of him became injured. Before my time, as I said, I've only been able to see lots of games in the last 5 years, but Kurt Warner's had a very hugely successful career. That mental aspect is really important. From the games that I've seen Tom Brady play, how he managed the chess game, how he ran down the clock, all that was perfection. Obviously, he had an incredible arm, very strong and accurate. And just to listen to some of his coaching speak on how to hold the ball and how to make sure that doesn't float, it's amazing. So there's a lot of nuance across a whole range of different areas, but definitely those who can think smartest on their feet, who can memorize a playbook and not make execution errors, they're very important traits.
So when you look at, since you're such a student of the game of the NFL, let's take the quarterback out of it right now. My personal opinion is I love the game, but sometimes I think it depends too much on the quarterback. So let's take the quarterback out of it. But in other positions, what do you think takes the most talent? And let's look at both. What takes the most talent to be good at, and then what takes the best mind to be good at?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it varies. And what's really amazing is that the body shapes are so different and that the training regimes are so different. If we look at those positions that attract the highest remuneration after the quarterback, it's often the left tackle because they're protecting the blind spot of the quarterback, or it's an edge rusher on the other side who's trying to attack the quarterback and make sure they don't have the time and cause turnovers. And then it's the wide receivers who can be down the field and create explosive plays and get those extra meters, followed by the cornerbacks who are trying to stop those wide receivers from taking the catches and getting into the end zone. So there's some of the not all wide receivers are the same. There's lots on every depth chart, but the really top-notch ones, they earn a lot of money, and that's similar for the left tackle. That's similar for the edge rusher, and it's similar for the cornerbacks. I really like the offensive line, the way that they have to take on the big fellas and have to defend and create extra time. So that is a position that I admire. But obviously, they don't attract the same sorts of salaries because they don't have as major impact on the game as those other positions, or at least can have the major impact as those other positions.
So when you look at those positions, let's take the line for instance. Left tackles probably make a lot of money, others don't as much. When you get to a certain level, like at the NFL, the abilities are, I would make the argument, very similar. There's not that many people that are that much better than the person across the line from them, but there's something about them that makes them a better player somehow. What do you think it is?
So scheme and philosophy, the coaching, all of the coaching is definitely a differentiator. That's without a shadow of a doubt. So not all coaches in the 32 positions are created equal. Some call it the offensive plays, some call it defensive plays, some are just the CEO type level coach. So that support mechanism is absolutely incredible and very differentiated. What I would say is if you're elite and the best in your chosen professional or best in your specific position, you will attract the higher remuneration. And so centres generally are paid less than left tackle, but the best of the best centres get paid a lot. And their ability to control a game, make sure they don't mistakes when they snap, take the playbook, understand it well, and lead that five-person unit as one, they become really critical. So it is a trade-off across positions, across the talent that you have on the depth chart, and where you have weaknesses in the off-season that you need to address, and how you develop your younger draftees from the previous year and where you're going to draft next to make sure that you have a nice, robust talent pool to call on.
So if I'm a leader reading this book of yours, and there's only one thing that I could change or one thing that I should change in my business that would really make a game changer in my business, what do you think that is?
That's a good question. So again, a lot of differences in businesses. What I would say is having a detailed playbook and then practicing that playbook. So for your team to deliver under pressure and execute well, you need to know that the preparation has been done, and that needs to be documented. So lots of organisations have policies. What does policies look like in execution? Sometimes procedures are very in the commoditised area, so there's a lot of room for knowledge workers to be a bit more liberal with how they apply the playbook. But if you want to be successful, you have to have done the hard yards around the planning and the execution. So I'd say playbooks are in those areas of the most importance.
So let's dive into this a little bit deeper, and I'm going to challenge you on this a little bit. So I've seen a lot of leaders who are very analytical and very strategic, and they put together a strategic plan, and they have, like a book about this fat of all the things and all the initiatives and all the things we need to do and whatever. And it takes a lot of time and effort and teamwork to put that together, and then it kind of sits on the shelf. So how do you focus on the few things or the important things to really get the business to where it needs to be without getting buried in the minutia? Because as we all know, there's so many things that you could do or that we maybe even should do, but if we try and do them all, then we kind of do them half-assed. So maybe we need to focus on a few. So how do you get to that point?
So I think that's an excellent scenario. So for me personally, I believe in the North Star, and that's what corrals focus and attention so that all teams are aligned and working towards the same objectives. I think that's really important. Sometimes North Stars are very broad, not so much measurable. But if you do have a measurable North Star and it focuses on business growth, then you're always going to be heading in the right direction. So I think that's one of the keys. When we talk about those strategy books, another example I would use is sometimes for larger organizations that have shared services, the shared services build their processes in isolation, don't necessarily have the domain knowledge in the area of the business or don't have any direct interaction with the customer. So customer interface is very important. How is the business creating value? What's the market that you're going after? And then the example I used before, as a franchise goes through the season, starts with the really thick playbook. When the pressure's on, they come down to their sweet spot 6 plays, and businesses can do that too. And I use that example to say, and to confirm what you've just said, Steve, is sometimes we create a lot of noise. And while we want to be bigger and better and have new initiatives and more strategies, sometimes that can be distracting. So once you get down to the final core in the Super Bowl, how are you going to make sure that you win? You're going to have your stock standard. Here's the 6 areas. These are our go-tos. Or in basketball, this is how we're going to get the easy layup or the easy bucket. What is the core business? How do we deliver it? How is this creating value for our customers? I think if you start with that focus and the growth mindset, you're always going to be heading in the right direction.
It makes me think of coming into camp at the beginning of the year as an NFL player. Every team has the same mission basically, and that's to get in and win the Super Bowl. So that's the mission. So the teams that don't get there, don't even come close to get there. Is it because the players don't really believe that they can get there? Or is it because the plan wasn't right? Or is it luck?
So it's a multitude of things. So luck's an interesting one, particularly when you consider the amount of resourcing that goes into the scouting and then which organisations over the last 5 years have drafted the best. So that's definitely a skill. There are trends there. Like I think if a franchise says it's luck, then they're not looking at the right thing. But from a head coach's perspective, there's lots of examples in the last 5 years of a coach only lasting one season. The owner decides we're heading in the wrong direction, so they are terminated, and then the new coach comes in, inheriting the previous roster. And to be fair to the new coach, then if the roster is not aligned with their scheme, philosophy, and playbook, they need to be given some time to develop players that are on the team who are capable of delivering what they want, or to be able to make moves through the trade system, even through cutting at some stage, to create enough vacancies in the roster to make sure they can recruit in the areas that are going to best suit their playbook and their philosophy.
I want to share another story. I told this not this long ago on this podcast, but I think it's pertinent to what we're talking about. So the first time that the Seahawks won a Super Bowl, this was back in the days of what the defense was called the Legion of Boom. And so Joe Buck, who's an NFL announcer, told the story that his wife was a Denver Broncos fan. And they were playing the Broncos in the Super Bowl. And so Joe Buck, as an announcer, went in, early in the week to interview the players and the teams like they do. And he said he went in and the Legion of Boom was all together, the defensive squad, and he talked to him. And he said he's never seen anything like it in all his years as an announcer. He came out, called his wife immediately, and said, "Your Broncos are in trouble." I have never seen a more focused Everyone's on the same page. Everyone's got the same mission. Everyone knows exactly what to do. He said it was unbelievable. And then if you remember the game they came out, I think they won 45-3 or something like that. So I just think that's what the analogies that we're making here is that if everybody understands the mission and understands their role and knows what they have to do and they believe in it and they practice for it and whatever, great things can be accomplished. But you have to have all those things aligned for sure.
And the Legion of Boom was very successful over a long period of time. I think in that particular example, when you've got strong-willed people who want to achieve the best, trust comes after, through those years of repetitions. So you reach the optimum where we're all on the same page. I know what you can do. You know what I can do. We have a playbook that we believe in. Let's go and make it happen. That causes a lot of synergies across. Legion of Boom, very small unit, and obviously the whole team was excellent. But having that mentality of the small squads going in, attacking a target and a goal and making it happen, it's beautiful to watch.
So when you started writing this book, I was interested in authors who write books. So you go into this book, and I would assume you kind of have some ideas in your head, and you start to do your research and you look at things to put in the book and how to do it. Is there anything that you believed when you started writing the book that when you finished the book, you changed your mind?
That's a really good one. I know I like to be data led, so I did have some hypotheses, and one of those were some sports had been entering the pre-COVID period already on a downward slide, have since used the COVID period as their excuse for underperformance. And student of the Jim Collins, and data is our friend, and we have to confront the brutal facts. And so that sort of had me inspired just to be able to research and say, hey, these words aren't matching what the data says. I think that was important. And I think that's really important for all businesses. So the businesses that start a slide have, again, Collins calls it hubris, but are very bullish in how they've performed historically, and that they continue to do the same things, perhaps without the discipline that they once had. So I think the discipline aspect is really important. It wasn't something I didn't expect, but as I researched it more and looked at different coaches and leaders and how they position their teams, and at what stage do they rotate players in rosters and why, and how to afford players. Like every roster is looking for that veteran they can get for a little bit cheaper, who has been there, done that, can be relied upon in any live bullets type situation. All those sorts of things came true. But the one that the key message of the title when I started, I certainly wasn't starting out to write a book that said Iron Sharpens Iron, how borrowing from pro sports can give businesses the winning edge. But that became more apparent as I got into the book. So the Iron Sharpens Iron mentality on how to get better, you get better as a group, and that having that team mindset, that became more evident as I worked through the book.
Well, those of us that love sports, I think the sports analogies are really practical and make a lot of sense because we understand that. Sometimes in the business world, you can get lost a little bit in the muck of it all, but sports, it's pretty clear and straightforward. So making those two analogies, I think is great. So in anticipation of our discussion today, what haven't I asked you that you want to be sure and get in the program today?
That's a good question. No, I think we've covered a lot. I think uh, my book covers a lot of financial performance. So from the business leader perspective, that's really important. I think the key message would be that performance under pressure doesn't happen accidentally. It does happen through a very disciplined planning process. So you might win a Super Bowl on Super Bowl day, but you can certainly lose it 12 months earlier. So how your preseason goes, you can start to see franchises that have a lot of noise. There might be someone holding out. They haven't got all their resources on the pitch for OTAs or for training camp. And so you're starting from behind. I think mindset-wise, when you look at your competitors, it's important that people are confident and they confident in their own skills and they can do certain things. Um, but when I look at what college coaches are teaching their young people, 20 to 23 years old, and the mindsets they then take into the business world, if they don't convert into an NFL career, that discipline of always improving, that continuous improvement, they're your future competitors. And so from a business leader's perspective, are you doing enough? And I think from a sporting analogy perspective, resilience is sometimes misunderstood as we just got to go harder, stay focused on the goal. In high performing environments, the rest and recovery process and the feedback loop is critical. And sometimes in business, we lose sight of that.
You make a very good point, and I think too, those of us that have been in business know that when things hit the shit hits the fan, so to speak, and a crisis happens, and you just see people move and do their thing, and what they prepared for is happening, and all these things go forward, without really knowing what's going to happen, but because everyone knows what to do and how to do it, it does happen, and you resolve the situation. It's beautiful to see. It's a little maybe harder to see or understand in a business compared to a sports team, but it does happen. And I think really good teams rise to the occasion, support each other, and do what's necessary as long as they have the culture that they believe they can do that.
Yeah, and I'd also include that when the game's on the line, whether it's business or the professional sporting field, your best players have to stand up and make those plays.
Yeah, for sure. So at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question, and that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
If I stick with the sporting analogies, I would say separation comes from preparation in coach speak.
That makes a lot of sense. That's great. Well, Andrew, thank you for this. I've learned a lot. It's again, for those of us that love sports and are in business, it makes total sense, and I think it's really good to learn from each other and learn how that works in the two disciplines. But they're very similar in a lot of ways, and I think we can learn a lot from coaches, and I think coaches can learn a lot from business leaders as well. So having that cross-pollination, I think, benefits both, and so you brought this together in the book. How do you find the book if people want to take this further?
Just jump on Amazon, Iron Sharpens Iron, Andrew Johnson, it'll come up.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for your time today. I appreciate it very much, and good luck out here in the west coast of the U.S. right now. We're having fabulous weather. I hope in Australia you're doing okay. It's getting close to your winter months, though, right?
It is, but at the moment, not a cloud in the sky, just a little bit fresh.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for your time today. I appreciate it. Take care, and thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks, Steve. Really enjoyed it.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.